Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, and it's warm outside, so it's heating up here. How's it going there, Jackie?
Yeah. It's dark outside, but still, it's actually going quite well. We've just had a few days of nice weather.
Cool.
So yeah,
Awesome.
7 degrees outside, and everybody has shorts on or something like that.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, I've been wearing shorts the last couple of days. It's been nice.
Yeah, that has.
So today, our podcast, we're going to talk about like the order of preference on what approach you take to automating a given problem, or something you're trying to automate. And so basically, for me, I'm going to start off just with the extremes, right? Of like, there's the one edge, which when I can use COM, if there's a COM object, like I go to that in a heartbeat. That's the first thing I always check. Is there a COM object available? Because it's so easy. The other extreme is, am I going to be sending keystrokes or mouse clicks? And I still use both. Don't get me wrong, but those obviously they interfere with the human doing stuff, this and that, and it's more problematic. And there's a lot more to adjust for it. So those are my two extremes. Does that line up with you, Jackie?
Yeah. I think it's probably something along those lines, right? Calm or maybe have someone else written something already. That also is quite high on my list.
That's a really good point. Yeah, sure. Because I may not do anything. I'll do as little work as possible. If something else is out there that's reliable.
True. Because hey, the GDI Plus library that someone wrote at one point, and of course COM, who was originally user written and then later added in. It's just amazing what people have done before you, and if that's something that you can leverage, all of that, that might be one of my really high on the list if I'm looking to what to really do. I of course, everybody has to do some mouse clicks and some keystrokes here and there, but yeah, try to keep away from those whenever possible.
Yeah. The next one and of course this is where it starts getting really not complicated, because each task you're trying to automate, it has a lot of different possibilities, and so it's really hard to kind of get into the between part of stuff. But just generally speaking, like the next thing I also do, it's kind of actually before anything, is I do a lot of web scraping. I do a lot of stuff with getting data and merging data. And so I'll check to see if there's an API available. Now that's, again, I'm using COM, generally speaking, to access that. But it can be a whole different approach of actually what you're doing. So I kind of throw it in there. It's a programmatical approach. So I like that.
Yeah, and I don't remember many, but I'm pretty sure that programs that have a COM object, that is equal to saying that it has an API.
Fair enough. It is, right.
Yeah, it's an application programmable interface, right? So
right.
That's at least how I see it.
Yeah.
And it's not often that I believe I've come across something that has an API per se without it being COM, but I do think that we'll see more like JavaScript APIs and stuff like that in the COM. And I think, is it Adobe that has that with their PDF kind of editor?
Yeah, well, they have their own version of JavaScript, if that's what you're alluding to.
Yeah. They have a COM object and they have a JavaScript thing, and something along those lines.
But the JavaScript isn't the normal like web page JavaScript flavor. It's a little, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But anyway, but they have their own, basically an API, a way to connect to it. And that was actually which is a really good point. Of like, there's the Windows API, which so much stuff that you can do, pulling stuff out of your Windows settings and doing whatever you want, right? I mean, there's an amazing amount of stuff you can do.
Absolutely.
Which I guess one of those, now does a DLL call kind of fit into that with the Windows API area? It's pretty similar, right?
I'd say it does because, yeah, Dell's, I can't even remember what that's short for, but it is something like dynamic.
Library,
Yeah,
linked library. Anyway.
something like that. Exactly right. And all it is just a collection of functions that you can actually call.
Right. And which of course means you're back to programmatic, doing stuff.
Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah.
It is. With a Dell call, you can get the dimensions of your screen or learn which Windows is on top of the rest of Windows or whatever it might be. It's Windows API. There really isn't. But yeah, it also covers lots of other programs because if they have a Dell and if it's documented or even probably if it isn't, you could probably still figure out how to actually call parts of whatever functions are in that program's Dells. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, so still within, like, to me, the Windows API realm are the whole send message and post message type, abilities. It's very similar to the DLL calls, right, of what you can do.
Yeah.
Very programmatic, very accurate, fast. And actually, we should mention all of these so far. Actually, almost everything we do, except for sending keystrokes and mouse clicks, doesn't interfere with the human doing things, right? That's one of the main reasons why I go to that last. Is I can have it running. The window doesn't have to be open, right? It can be doing whatever, and it's really nice to have that kind of a tool.
Yeah, one of the things that I like when thinking about send message and post message and all of those things is some of these Windows spies that we have looked at as well, Joe, where it's actually looking at all the messages that a window gets. And when you move the mouse cursor across the window, seeing those hundreds and hundreds of messages that are sent to that window, just telling it, now the mouse cursor is here. So yeah, it really shows you how important the send and post messages really are, and how much you use it.
And isn't it? It's another term that's, I think, bantered around with that is the Windows shell or something. Is that where it's leaving somewhere it hangs where you can go connect with the and pull the stuff, right? Is that the shell somewhere in there?
I don't have a great way or a great understanding on what the shell per se is, but it is, as it says, it is a shell. I believe it's kind of like a turtle shell. It's kind of like what covers everything that we see on Windows, and because it is kind of Windows, it's Windows shell. So each time a window is minimized, it would tell the shell, it would tell Windows that it's being minimized. So Windows can take the appropriate actions of actually removing it from the rendered area and putting it in the icon on the taskbar, and so on and so forth. So to have those actions happen correctly, the shell needs to be informed about it. So if you hook on to the shell and receive the messages that it receives, you can of course know when a window is minimized or maximized or when whatever Windows stuff happens. That's what the shell is for, at least.
Cool. Hold on one second here. I was trying to remember the name of this other one. What's the when menu select? Actually, that one for me. Let me put it back in my list. But that one, I got one more before that. Is the using controls, right? Or the class n or class n is the instance of it. But the control get, control set text, all those things. It's another great thing.
Yeah. As I think Lexicos and others keeps pointing out is that on Windows everything is a window. So a control is actually just a window with the styles of what is called a control. So by giving said window the right parameters, it becomes what we see as an edit control or as a static text control. But it's still just a window, but we have just told that window to act in a specific way as a control. So yeah, it's the same. If you tell this window it's a button, it will get a border, it will have 3D effects and stuff. So yeah, controls are really, really essential to understanding, automating at least some parts of Windows and Windows in general.
Yeah, and that's what, especially with a lot of programs that have been written, let's say about 10 years ago, well, maybe it's not that quite that long ago, but they were written in they still used controls, and so you could programmatically interact with them pretty reliably and pretty darn fast. And so I've used them a lot with some of the stuff we've been doing.
Yeah, and I'd say most of Windows are still filled with all kinds of controls and sub windows and all that stuff. But yeah, a lot of stuff is also being done by a background process of some kind, where, let's say you have the edit control in a SETE editor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can get the parent control of that, but what's going on below that, that's done by other code that isn't really exposed to Windows. So Windows doesn't really know which sub-controls are in a SETE edit control.
Yeah, but
even though they're still there.
At least Site for AutoHotkey has a COM object, right?
Yeah.
So you can actually, manipulate it in a lot of other ways. And they have their own messages. You can send messages, which I know you know this more than me. But again, there is another whole. That is one where we were talking earlier, and you were talking about other programs that have their own language. Isn't that right? That's one right there. Where I know we both played with that, and it's cool.
Exactly.
So then now we have the when menu select item and when menu set. So you can programmatically interact with the older, not the ribbon menus, but these are programs that use those. And a lot of the commands you'd want to use are actually, in those menus, and often have an accelerator key, and you can ping exactly. Again, it doesn't have to activate it, right? It needs to exist, and then you can go through and do an amazing amount of stuff very fast.
I'm pretty sure that even with the ribbons, I'm totally with you on those. Those are hard to work with from the knowledge that we have and the tools that we at least know how to use. But the overall general idea is that you can interact with almost anything on a window of a little bit dated, like maybe Notepad or something like that. And of course there's lots of other programs that have the same controls still. But slowly programmers are moving away from those very individual controls, because some of them had a lacking in visual niceness, might be one way of putting it.
Yeah, I hear you. I love them, right? I obviously my computer, I make everything try to look like that, because I want just simple. Give it to me straight. I don't care about fancy. But yeah, I hear you. So the next one, I have two side by side, and actually I'd love to say I have some news on the latter, but I'm not quite there yet. But using the accessibility object or / library and the ACC viewer, right, is another great way where you can programmatically, go and choose things from a ton of programs. It's amazing what's available. I've had a harder time setting stuff, but getting text out is usually not bad at all. Or getting the location of a given thing and then sending a mouse click to that location, or a control click, maybe I should say, is even better. But that one is awesome. The UI automation, that's kind of like that's, if I understand correctly, that is like the technology behind the ribbon and other things. And I've been playing more and more with Jethro wrote a library in it. And once I'm done with some other stuff, I'm going to get back into it. And I might just try to get, so the big thing is I would go to that a lot quicker if we had a quote ACC viewer for the UI automation tool, which doesn't right now, to my knowledge, doesn't exist that we have. I found a tool from Microsoft I can drag and use it the same way and see, I think, the correct UI automation not methods, I guess, whatever they're what are the other ones? Methods and non-methods. What are the other ones? The things in properties, right?
Properties,
so you can see, where things are, and then you know how to connect to it. I think what I'm seeing in that tool from Microsoft is giving me that information. With any luck, and Maestris Health is my plan, I can get him to build a tool that will build for AutoHotkey the same thing, and then allow us to programmatically interact with it, like the ACC library and tool, because that to me would be really awesome, because it the whole thing, like you mentioned earlier, there's so much switching to the ribbon over time, and this thing, I played with it on Office Tools. I can see every little thing on the ribbon with it, so I've got my fingers crossed. I'm going to do a little more digging.
And to me, it's also interesting that a lot of these newer things, I don't know when they came into existence, then they could be quite old. But yeah, some of those things that we don't have easy access to, the complexity of actually working with them seems to be quite a bit higher than the older ones. So yeah, you might have had a way to get the menu or select the second drop-down menu on Notepad. But now with these newer ways of doing stuff like that, it doesn't feel like anybody actually thought that others would need to automate it. It's where the other stuff, it's written in what seems like a more basic way, where this needs to be reused by someone else, maybe in the next office, or when I pass this on to the other team, they need to understand what's going on as well. And I've even written these functions in this Dell here so they can interact with it if they want to. Where with the new stuff, it doesn't appear to be the way you do it anymore. Just need to get that pretty stuff cranked out, and then people can try and figure out how to automate it if they want to. It's not really my headache.
Yeah. So the next one, of course, for my list is it's just above the sending keystrokes and mask lists, of course, but it's highly dependent on what you're doing. But if there's a way to get the text, if you're manipulating text or something like that, if you can copy it to the clipboard, then suddenly you can manipulate things like crazy without necessarily sending keystrokes to try to do stuff. It reminds me of the webinar where the one caller, the person wanted help, and he was doing search replace, using search replace, I think it was WordPad or something.
Yeah.
But he was manually literally clicking the buttons of search and replace, on the file. And it was still working, don't get me wrong. But we were like, hey, if you know the path to that file, you can read the file into memory and then do what you want, right? And it's much more reliable and faster, lightning fast. But of course, that really depends on what you're doing.
Yeah, it does. Again, I think most of us said it back in the day with HTML in an older version, where it would make a lot of sense for you to just make a single get call to the server and get all of the HTML back, and then you'd have all of the information you needed. Mm-hmm. Now, with all of the extra code and all of the extra bells and whistles that actually happens within both the browser and live on the site, that doesn't really work as well anymore.
Sure.
Once did, but yeah, you can take whatever old method like search and replace within your text editor of choice, but yeah, with the right tool set like AutoHotkey, just as this example, you can really do a lot of stuff. And I had at one point someone, I can't remember which editor it was, but he needed to do some specific thing. He needed to move the cursor to a specific word on a specific line, but the editor didn't really have any way of moving the cursor. He could use search just fine, and it would move the viewport to the word, but it wouldn't select it. It wouldn't put the cursor there or anything. So instead, it became that a script that actually copied all of it, looked for where that word was, and then took actions to make sure that it actually managed to put the cursor in the right spot, even selecting the correct word. But yeah, it was just kind of thinking outside of his editor, reading the file over here, and calculating where in whatever you need to know, and then just sending, let's say, keystrokes. I can't remember what we did back then, but
to move it.
At least just moving the
to where you need to be.
I had one at the same place where he would have the cursor in the actual line, and he wanted to, let's say, select whichever word on that line he needed, and there was no way of actually getting the data from the line, and you couldn't just tell it to select 10 to the left, because he didn't actually know where the cursor was at any given time. But then, can't remember which command it is, but Control End Shift Home, something like that, would actually select the entire line, and then you had it in the clipboard, and you could do the same actions on that as well.
Right.
So the clipboard is a great tool.
The other one I wanted to mention, I just realized it has come in handy for me at times, is the ability to be able to just pull what's in the status bar, right, of a given program, because you can often programs you can get what's in that status bar and understand, what the status is of that program, where it is, what line it's on. Sometimes, I mean, there's some information there that sometimes that's it, which brings up what you just explained, Jackie, and to walk us through is sometimes you need to take a step back and really be very clear about what the goals are, what you're trying to get, not how you get them, right? And like, hey, if my goal is just to understand where this word is in this thing, but I don't have to do that in there, right? It's just understand, that, then it can help you rethink the problem, right, of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. And also, this might not be related, but if you're struggling with how to automate a specific task, it might actually help to take a break from it, or do something, automate something else, or sleep on it. Sleep on it actually works quite well.
Yeah. One of my favorite scripts at TI, I dreamt it. I woke up with the answer, with this. I wasn't even trying to come up with it, but in my sleep, it's something. I'm like, it popped in my head of like what I should do, and I'm like, holy cow! Like I had never even had it as a thought that I was aware of. But yeah, there's a lot of research I think that says definitely taking a break from what you're doing, or talk about it. Like I actually, talk about it with someone else, and suddenly you're like, oh, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about this.
Yeah. I've often loved to actually, maybe not painstakingly explaining exactly what the code does to someone who doesn't give a whatever. But again, to someone more interested or someone who might need to know, having to explain what you did there and what you did here can actually work quite well to get around.
Yeah, one is just getting around issues, but two is thinking of other ways you could have, when your brain works differently when you're talking versus just thinking, right? So,
I heard, I can't remember what was it, rubber ducking or something? I can't remember if that's the right term.
Bobblehead. Yeah, but you talk.
Bobblehead.
Yeah. Same thing. Yep. Yeah. Pick something and explain it to that. I usually just try to find somebody that, especially if they're better than I am, right? That's great, but it doesn't always have to be. Just explain it to somebody else, and often it can help.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do we think we covered at least the obviously there's still a lot of different ways you can do stuff on AutoHotkey, but those are the ones I usually go to. Is one of those things in terms of order.
Exactly, and again, totally. There's lots of different ways to do different stuff, and here we haven't really gotten to any of those pixel acting stuff, OCR,
Yes.
all of those. And
that should have been in this list, though. At least as a reference to say, finding a thing, with some sort of an image search. I think that should be in our list, because you're right. I still do that somewhat frequently. Sometimes it's just the fastest, easiest way.
Yeah,
it's still technically you're sending keystrokes or a mouse click, but it's not just that, right? It's I think that's a little bit different, and I'd put that a little bit above the other one.
Most of the time, it's something like, okay, on my on my whatever, this button is always on the coordinates 100 and 100. But maybe that's not always the case, because something in the program, something might have loaded, some other window might have extended where it is. Using an image search or a pixel search or whatever might actually solve that small dynamic issue. So that can be quite useful.
Yeah, and just sometimes it's just fast. You can do it quickly, and you're like, all right, I'm done. It's not robust, but you know what? I just need to get this thing done quickly, and it works.
You know what? Cut the snippet, put it into a search, tell it to click it if it finds it on the screen. Nothing fancy, nothing in the background, nothing. Just click that button if you can see it.
Yep.
Yeah. Totally.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that was a pretty good, review of the overall priorities.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.